Hello, my name is Varela. I was 8 years old the first time they called me a walking virus. They said it was just a sneeze, but that night they sent me away with a suitcase and no goodbye. Years later, after I built a business from silence and grit, they found out I had $12 million. At Christmas dinner, my father slammed his glass down and yelled, "Give it to your sister!" And I smiled, reached for my phone, and pressed a button that changed everything. But what pushed a quiet daughter to cut off her entire family? And why did they think they could keep taking? Until I disappeared. Would you have done the same? I arrived early because I always did, even when I knew it didn't matter. Even when I knew the people behind that door wouldn't greet me with warmth, I showed up anyway. The porch lights flickered with the kind of hesitation I'd grown used to, as if the house itself wasn't sure if I belonged. Balancing two stacked dessert boxes from a French patisserie downtown, I nudged the doorbell with my elbow. No answer. I waited. It wasn't freezing cold outside, but the chill bit at my hands just enough to make the silence feel intentional. After a minute, I opened the door myself. It was never locked, not to me or the mailman or anyone really, because nothing in that house was private except the truth. "Varela's here," someone muttered from the dining room. No one came to the door, no hug, no fake smile, just a muttered notification passed like background noise. I set the desserts on the kitchen island, the boxes pristine, still cold. A woman in a red blazer stood nearby. I didn't recognize her, mid-40s, gold hoops, perfectly curled hair. She gave me a once-over and turned to Isolde. "Who's this?" she asked, half whispering. "Oh, that's Lily's friend," my mother replied, as if she hadn't just outed herself. "Tech support, I think. She helps Lily sometimes." I didn't flinch, didn't speak up, just walked to the fridge and grabbed a glass of water. My name wasn't important in this house, not really. The last time I corrected her, she'd smiled and said, "Oh, honey, don't be so sensitive." Like being forgotten was a choice I'd made. Later that evening, after the dishes had been cleared and the men had drifted into the living room to argue about football, I found myself in the corner of the dining room, next to the sliding door that led to the backyard. That spot was always mine. It used to be my refuge during barbecues when I was a kid, back when I still thought being present might eventually earn me a seat at the table. My eyes landed on the fireplace mantel. Photos lined the top. All recent. All of Lily. Lily at a nonprofit gala. Lily with her boyfriend at Joshua Tree, Lily in a graduation robe, which I knew belonged to me because I remembered that exact tear on the sleeve. I loaned it to her. She never returned it. I stood there a while, long enough that the hum of voices faded into static. And then it came, a voice from my memory, sharp and sterile. "Get her out of here!" It was Thanksgiving. I was 8. I had sneezed once, just once, but in the post-flu hysteria that swept through our family that year, it was enough. "She's a walking virus," my mother hissed. "Call Celine. She's already exposed us all." Celine arrived 30 minutes later. She didn't say much, just wrapped me in my coat and led me to her car. "It's just for the weekend," she promised, buckling me in. It wasn't. For the next 9 years, every time I coughed, every time I looked pale, every time someone in the house got sick, I was shipped off. To Celine. To a second cousin in Akron. Once even to a former babysitter. I was passed around like a potentially contaminated package. My room became a storage closet. Lily moved into a bigger room with lavender walls and shelves filled with American Girl dolls. My books were boxed up and left in the garage. "You're not being punished," Isolde would say, folding towels. "You're just delicate. We're trying to protect you." But I wasn't being protected. I was being erased. Quietly, efficiently. I learned to read people the way others read novels. I watched for eye rolls, for dismissive nods, for smiles that didn't reach the eyes. It became second nature, knowing when I wasn't wanted. By the time I was 13, I stopped protesting. When Lily turned 10, she had a garden party. I made cupcakes. Spent the night before baking 3 dozen in Celine's cramped kitchen. I was so proud. At the party, Isolde pulled me aside. "Sweetheart, could you stay in the kitchen? We don't want too many people crowding the yard." I stood behind the curtain and watched. One of the mothers turned to Isolde and asked, "Is that the babysitter?" Isolde laughed. "Something like that." That was the moment. Not when I was sent away. Not when my name was left off the school directory. Not when my science fair trophy was accidentally thrown out. That moment, when my mother couldn't even say my name to a stranger, that was when I stopped expecting anything. Back in the present, Martin lifted his glass. "To family," he declared, his voice echoing slightly off the vaulted ceiling. "To Lily." Everyone raised their glasses. I reached for mine, a simple water glass. No one noticed I wasn't holding wine. No one cared that I hadn't spoken in over an hour. Isolde turned to me, smile frozen in time. "You're still quiet as always, Varela." I held her gaze for just a moment longer than polite. "That's because I learned silence was safer." She blinked. Maybe she heard it. Maybe she didn't. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that I said it. And just like that, the air shifted. Peace was the last thing I felt on my own birthday. I was 18, living alone in a studio apartment with peeling linoleum floors and a view of the parking lot where neighbors left cigarette butts in old coffee cans. It was my first birthday away from everyone, and still, I hadn't expected much, but I did expect something. A phone call, a text, anything. The day had been quiet. I'd gone to my classes, worked a double shift at the campus bookstore, and stopped by a gas station to grab a cupcake with sprinkles. When I got home, I lit one candle, dimmed the lights, and whispered, "Happy birthday" to me, like I was rehearsing a lie I didn't believe in. I checked my phone. Not a single message. Not even a forwarded meme or a family group chat. "Miss you." Just silence, thick and final. Except one thing. A letter taped to the inside of my mailbox, the old-fashioned kind you had to unlock with a rusted key. It was from Celine, my aunt, the only person who ever asked if I was okay without expecting me to answer quickly. She wrote, "I know it's not easy being the one no one sees, but your life will be bigger than this silence. It already is." I held that note long after the candle fizzled out. I still have it. 6 years later, I sent my first wire transfer home, not for me, of course, for Lily. Mom called, frantic. "Your sister's tuition at Belmont is short this semester. It's been a rough year. Could you help?" I didn't even ask how much. I just asked where to send it. I was building a new client base then, running data scrubs for a security firm. The money didn't come easy, but I'd been trained since childhood to give without being thanked. The money went through the next day. No one called to say they got it. A week later, I saw a photo on Lily's Instagram. She was standing under a balloon arch that read, "Happy 22nd birthday," holding a 3-tiered cake covered in edible gold leaf. The caption read, "Feeling so loved. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for everything. Everything." I wanted to tell myself the tuition got handled separately, that the party was planned long before. But I knew the exact number I had wired. I recognized the venue from an invoice I'd seen in a folder on Mom's desk once. I knew what it meant when someone said, "It's covered." It meant I paid, and they took credit. Still, I said nothing. A year after that, I tried something foolish. I tried to believe that maybe things had changed. I booked a tiny restaurant, one of those family-owned Italian spots with too many photos on the wall and red checkered tablecloths that felt like someone's home. I invited everyone. Mom, Dad, Lily, even cousins who never remembered my birthday when we were kids. No one showed. At 7:15, the waiter came over. "Would you like us to bring out the cake?" he asked gently. I looked at the chocolate sheet cake I'd brought, still in its cardboard box. "No," I said. "Just pack it up. I'll take it home." Back at my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote in my journal, "Maybe this is how strong people are born, in empty chairs and melted candles." That cake lasted me 3 days. It was delicious. The following spring, I transferred another $2,000 to Mom. "For Lily's business license," she said. "She's really taking off now. So proud of her." No one asked if I had filed my own taxes yet. No one asked if I was sleeping. Then came the Christmas dinner from hell. We were all seated. I had brought 2 bottles of wine, a fruit tart, and a rosemary roasted chicken because Isolda always acted surprised when I showed up empty-handed. The tart was untouched. Lily had already posted a selfie with the store-bought cake Mom got for her earlier. Halfway through dinner, Lily leaned over her glass of sparkling cider and said, "Remember that Paris-themed party I had at 22? That was so dreamy." She turned to me. "You covered that, didn't you?" Mom added. "Of course she did. Our Varela has always been generous, even when she had nothing." Dad chuckled, stabbing his ham. "Yeah, no matter what, she always found a way to help. That's our girl." I gripped my fork so tightly I thought the metal might bend. I smiled. They didn't know that month I skipped rent by 3 days. They didn't know I borrowed against my own health insurance. They didn't know I worked 6 weekends in a row to make up for it. They just knew the check cleared. I didn't say a word. I never did. But that night, as I washed the wine glasses in their kitchen, I counted how many had lipstick marks that weren't mine. And I thought, not for the first time, that maybe I wasn't born for this family. Maybe I was placed here to survive it. Later, I sat in the guest room, scrolling through old photos I never posted. There was one of the cake from that Italian restaurant, the chocolate one, the one no one saw. They only remembered when it was her celebration, but they forgot who paid the deposit. That thought didn't come from anger. It surfaced like a quiet tide as I stood in the living room, watching Lily gush over her TEDx application. The fireplace crackled beside her, warm light flickering across her face, but none of it reached me. I had taken a step back, near the archway between the kitchen and dining room, careful not to interrupt the show. "This one's about women in tech," Lily said, clicking through her PowerPoint slides on the living room TV. "I need a strong quote to open with. Something that really lands." She scrolled to the second slide. I blinked once, then again. There it was. My line. Word for word from my thesis presentation 2 years ago at Stanford. "When women control the algorithm, they rewrite the outcome." Isolda nodded, oblivious. "Oh, I like that. It sounds expensive." Martin chuckled. "You always were the creative one, Lily." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Not yet. A few days after the holidays, I returned to the house to pick up some things from the garage. It was early morning. Fog still clung to the grass, and the neighborhood was unusually still. Martin had given me the code to the side door years ago, and it hadn't changed. I stepped inside and was immediately hit with the scent of citrus cleaner and peppermint candles. I made my way up to the attic instead. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to find the one thing I hadn't been given in that house, evidence I had mattered. The attic was cluttered, boxes stacked against the wall, each labeled with masking tape. Lily's ballet recitals, Lily's first Christmas, Lily's college send-off. It wasn't until I found a dusty box shoved behind a rack of winter coats that I saw something different. "Memories, Lily's growing up," it read. I sat cross-legged on the wooden floor and opened it. The photos came out in waves. Lily in front of the fireplace holding her kindergarten certificate. Lily on the swing set at age 10, cake all over her face. Lily in a pink gown at prom, with Mom beaming at her side. I flipped through each one, faster with each turn. Not a single photo of me, not even one of us together. Then, near the bottom, I found a group shot, Thanksgiving, maybe 2003. Martin, Isolda, Lily, and a few cousins smiling around the dining table. I was there, barely. My hand, cropped and blurred, resting on the chair next to Lily. That was it. I sat back, holding the photo like it might burn through my palm. I always wondered why my name wasn't in the captions. Now I knew. I'd been written out before I even left the room. Years before that attic visit, I had worked my way through high school by building things, robotics competitions, engineering fairs. I spent weekends soldering circuits while Lily was off at cheer camp. I earned a perfect SAT score. Not near perfect, not really good. Perfect. No one framed that letter. No one took a picture of me holding it. When I got into the University of Chicago with a scholarship, Isolda called it an intense environment. She told everyone I was doing data stuff. Meanwhile, when Lily got a C+ in English, Martin printed the grade report and taped it to the fridge. "She fought hard for that," he said. "Some kids just need more support." I taught myself Python by junior year of college, ran simulations for lab projects, joined a startup that failed but taught me everything. At 29, I enrolled in the executive MBA program at Stanford. I told them over Sunday dinner, thinking, stupidly, that maybe this would be the thing. Isolde smiled over her fork. "Oh, one of those online hobby programs. That's sweet." Lily tilted her head, genuinely curious. "Are you trying to pivot into, like, candles or soaps? I know someone with an Etsy shop who'd love a business plan." I didn't respond, not because I was ashamed, but because I had learned by then that explaining my achievements in that house was like whispering into a canyon. It only echoed back with someone else's voice. My MBA was hard-earned. Remote didn't mean easy. I led group strategy meetings with CEOs in Germany and Brazil. I worked with professors who didn't care that I wasn't from Harvard. They cared that I delivered, and I did. When I finally graduated, I didn't tell anyone. I booked a photographer for myself, just me in a gray wool blazer, holding a sign that read, "From invisible to inevitable." I posted it on my LinkedIn. Martin commented, "So proud of all our daughters." I let it stay. That night after the TEDx slide incident, I went back home, my home, and pulled out my original thesis. I had saved every draft, every peer-reviewed comment, every revised line. The quote Lily had used, my quote, was on slide 6, marked with a sticky note that read, "Anchor this." I didn't send an email. I didn't confront her. I added it to a folder on my desktop labeled Proof. That folder had grown a lot in recent years. What stunned me most wasn't that Lily had used my words. It was how easily everyone accepted them as hers, how comfortable the family was with attributing brilliance to her when it had never been her strength. She was charming, beautiful, socially adept, but she didn't build anything. I did. But that never mattered in our house. The ones who built were expected to hand over the blueprints and step aside. 2 days later, I got a group text. "Family dinner Sunday, Lily's big announcement." I replied with a thumbs up. Then I opened my folder and began reviewing the files. Because I knew the announcement wouldn't be about what she built. It would be about what I had already made and what she was going to claim next. They thought I wouldn't. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam the door or yell or even flinch. I sat through that Sunday dinner like a guest at someone else's wedding, smiling at the wrong times, nodding at people who didn't remember my name, quietly waiting for it to be over. But inside, I had already drawn the line. It started with a slide. The phrase "empowered through code" was splashed across Lily's TEDx presentation draft, displayed proudly on the living room TV. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a direct lift from my Stanford pitch. I had rehearsed that phrase in the mirror at 2 a.m., muttered it into my pillow after too many cold coffees and deadlines. "Where'd you get that?" I asked, careful not to sound accusing. Lily didn't even glance at me. "It came to me. Sometimes inspiration just shows up, you know?" I knew. The rest of the family nodded as if brilliance were a bloodline, and Lily had inherited it all. No one questioned it. Why would they? I'd taught them for decades that I didn't raise my hand, that I didn't ask for credit. Later that night, back at my apartment, I opened the original file from my MBA presentation. There it was, slide 4. Same font, same phrasing. I opened my folder titled Callista Archives and dropped it in. That folder had grown steadily over the past 2 years. One entry was a blurry Instagram story from the launch event of her so-called startup. It wasn't even the caption that caught my attention. It was the vision board behind her, partially visible, featuring a customer workflow diagram I'd designed during an accelerator program. A diagram I'd once emailed Mom, asking for thoughts. "Looks too complicated," she'd said. "Why don't you just help Lily with her social media instead?" Turns out, it wasn't too complicated to steal. I hadn't planned to attend that brunch the following Sunday. But Isolde sent a voice message, something she rarely did, saying, "It's important you be there. Lily's got an announcement and it would mean a lot." I went. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted to see how deep they'd dig before realizing they were standing on my shoulders. The announcement was what I expected. Lily had been selected for a Women in Innovation feature in a local business magazine. There were claps, a champagne toast, and a half-hearted speech from Martin about raising daughters who do big things. I was about to excuse myself when Lily's boyfriend, Ian, leaned over. "You know," he whispered, just close enough, "you're the real genius. I've seen the files." I turned my head slowly. His breath smelled faintly of bourbon. My eyes met his without blinking. He smiled. "Dinner sometime?" I didn't answer, just reached for my phone under the table, opened the messages, and forwarded his text straight to Lily. No caption, no warning. Then I put the phone face down and finished my mimosa. That should have been the end of it, but drama never ends quietly in our family. 2 days later, I walked into Sunday dinner and barely had my coat off before Lily slammed her phone on the kitchen island. "You trying to ruin my life now?" Martin looked up from the ham he was carving. "What's going on?" "She's sending me screenshots from Ian," Lily snapped, pointing at me like I'd pulled the fire alarm. Isolde stepped in, soft and sugary. "Let's not do this now. It's a family night." Lily rounded on me again. "You're jealous, aren't you? You've always been bitter because people actually like me." I held her gaze. "People don't like you. They tolerate the story you've told them about yourself." Martin slammed his palm flat on the table. "Enough!" He turned to me, anger crawling across his face. "Why do you always have to ruin her moments?" I didn't respond immediately. I let the question hang like stale air. Isolde walked over and placed a hand on my arm. "Don't ruin her moment again, sweetheart. Let her have this." That's when I realized. To them, Lily's moments were sacred. Mine were optional. I stepped back. "I didn't ruin anything," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't mine in the first place." I drove home that night without turning the radio on. My thoughts were louder than any noise. At home, I made tea. Jasmine from a tin Aunt Celine had mailed me last fall. As I waited for the kettle to whistle, I opened my email, found the folder again, and added the new screenshots. Lily's captions, Ian's text, the blurry vision board. Each one went into a subfolder labeled Evidence of Pattern. It wasn't about revenge, it was about proof. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. Sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and titled it, "If this continues, I will act." I listed every incident, every document, every copied idea. I labeled them by date, by event, by source. Then I saved the file. I didn't send it anywhere, not yet. But I was done pretending I was just the background in Lily's story, because they were about to ask for even more. It had been 4 days since the dinner where I laid out my boundaries with the calm of a woman who'd been dismissed one too many times. I'd barely caught my breath from that exchange when I got the first alert. "New account activity reported under your social security number." The notification blinked on my phone like a warning flare. I tapped in, heart steady. I already knew it wasn't good. It was a car loan, $38,000, co-signed by me. Except, I hadn't signed a damn thing. My name, my credit score, my liability, all attached to a cherry red SUV currently registered under Callista Avery. And here's the kicker. It had been active for nearly 6 months. I closed my laptop, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to the bank. Not because I thought they'd fix it quickly, but because I needed to hear someone say it out loud. Yes, someone used your name. Yes, someone forged your information. And no one will care unless you scream about it in just the right way. The bank manager, a soft-spoken woman with tired eyes and a nameplate that read Janice, blinked twice when I showed her the printouts. "Do you have proof this wasn't authorized?" "I have proof I was never even in this city the week it was filed." She nodded slowly, her fingers tapping on the keyboard. "We'll freeze the account for now, but I recommend putting a fraud alert on your credit. This could be a pattern." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she had no idea how right she was. By the time I got back home, the sun was dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across my living room. I dropped my purse, sat on the couch, and opened a blank email. The subject line was simple: immediate action required. I addressed it to both Martin and Isolde. If my name is used without consent again, I will involve legal authorities. No more warnings. I hit send, not out of rage, but resolve. I'd spent my entire adult life building things, protecting myself quietly, but this wasn't silence. This was theft. 2 days passed, no reply, not even a passive-aggressive thumbs up from Martin. Then, mid-afternoon, I got a voicemail from Isolde. "You're being dramatic, sweetheart. It's just a formality. Families help each other. Why would you bring lawyers into it?" "Because you taught me not to trust what's done behind closed doors." Sunday rolled around faster than I wanted, but I showed up anyway. That was still the rule in our family. You don't miss dinner unless you're dying or dead. The dining room was dressed to impress. Linen napkins, gold-rimmed glasses, an actual centerpiece with floating candles. Isolde always did love to overcompensate. I took my usual seat near the end, next to the window. Callista sat at the head, beaming like the queen of someone else's parade. "To Callista," Isolde announced, lifting her flute of champagne. "For growing her brand and staying authentic." Everyone raised their glass. Everyone except me. I had water. Martin glanced over. "Can't you just be proud of your sister for once?" I looked at him, measured, calm. I am proud of people who build, not those who borrow and never return. Silence. Just for a moment. Then Lily laughed, soft and dismissive. "Always so serious." Isolde waved a hand. "She's always been the intense one." I reached into my bag and pulled out a red folder. Simple, thick, weighted with 6 months' worth of statements, emails, call logs, and side-by-side comparisons of my signature versus the forged one. I placed it on the table, right in front of Isolde. "What's this?" she asked, her smile faltering. "Receipts," I said. "Proof of who signed what. Proof of what's in my name. Proof of what's been taken without permission." She reached for it, but I moved it back toward me. "This time, I keep the receipts." Callista rolled her eyes. "God, it's not that deep." Martin leaned forward. "You really want to turn this into a court battle over a misunderstanding?" I met his stare without flinching. "I don't want anything, but I will protect myself. If any of you use my name again, it won't be a conversation. It'll be litigation." Isolde pressed her lips together. "Don't threaten us. We're family." I shook my head. "Exactly. And that used to mean something." The rest of the dinner went on in a quiet tension. Callista bragged about a brand collab with a skincare line that sounded made up. Martin kept sipping wine like it was going to change the subject. Isolde kept eyeing the red folder like it might bite her. After dessert, I helped clear the table. Out of habit. Some scars don't fade. They just shift into muscle memory. That night, back home, I scanned every document in the folder into a secure drive. I labeled each file with timestamps and keywords. I backed it up twice, once to the cloud and once to an encrypted USB. Then I opened a new document. Timeline of forgery and financial exploitation. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. I added a final line. Let them try and twist this. Because the next time they questioned what I gave, I wouldn't answer with words. I'd answer with evidence. They didn't chase after me. They plotted instead. That's the thing about silence. People mistake it for surrender. They assume if you're not yelling, if you're not throwing plates or crying in the driveway, you're weak. But silence can be a choice, a scalpel instead of a hammer. And that Christmas night, I wielded it like a surgeon. After I left the house, I didn't go straight home. I needed to breathe. I parked 3 blocks away from my apartment, walked through the quiet residential streets in flats that pinched and a coat that suddenly felt too thin. The air was cold but crisp, the kind that stung your lungs on purpose. I stopped at the corner cafe that miraculously stayed open late on holidays, ordered peppermint tea. The girl behind the counter asked if I wanted whipped cream. I said no. Too much sweetness after too much poison. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop, the same one Callista had poked through earlier that evening when she came into my childhood room uninvited, looking for a charger. The same laptop she used to stumble across my open dashboard. One glance and she'd seen the number, my company's operating account balance, $12.4 million. That's what had cracked the evening wide open. She hadn't knocked. She never did. I heard her voice ring out from the hallway as she marched toward the dining room, laptop in hand like a smoking gun. "She's rich!" she shouted, as if I'd hidden gold in the backyard. Forks clattered, glasses paused midair. I walked in slowly, hands still damp from washing them. "What are you talking about?" Martin asked, his eyes narrowing. Callista spun the laptop around, pointing at the screen. "Look, $12 million. She's been hoarding it while we've been struggling to pay taxes, tuition, everything. She let me drive that beat-up Corolla while she had this." Isolde stood up so fast her chair tipped. "Are you serious, Varela? You let us beg while you sat on a fortune?" I didn't reply right away. I reached for my laptop, calmly slid it back to my side of the table, and closed it. Martin's voice cut in, thick with accusation. "We raised you. You owe this family." Callista, still flushed, added, "You wouldn't even be in tech if I hadn't introduced you to that coding camp. Don't act like you built this on your own." That was the line that nearly made me laugh. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a napkin, and dried my hands again. My fingers were trembling, not from fear, but from restraint. When I came back into the room, everyone was watching me like a stranger who'd just walked in with bad news. I stood at the end of the table and looked at each of them, one by one. "You don't raise a child by ignoring her for 2 decades, I said quietly. Martin blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, "that you don't get to demand a share of something you had no hand in building. You don't get to claim rights over someone you made invisible." Isolde gasped. "You've always had a roof over your head. You think we didn't sacrifice?" I nodded. "You did. For Callista." "She's your sister," Isolde snapped. "A real daughter would help her sister." I felt my jaw tighten. But instead of yelling, I walked over to the laptop and opened it. I pulled up my banking interface, found the recurring transfer I had been sending them. $7,000 a month, every month for the past 3 years. I hovered over the cancel button for less than a second. Click. Then I opened the legal freeze I had prepared, restricting access to any accounts, authorizations, or business information tied to my name. Click. Then I turned around. I gave without being asked. I gave because I thought it meant something. But giving in silence only taught you that I owed you more. So now, I stop, in silence too. They stared at me. No one moved, not even Callista. "You're not family anymore," Martin said, the words jagged and sharp. "No," I replied. "I was never really allowed to be." I walked toward the door. My coat was still hanging on the hook. I didn't rush. I didn't slam anything. I pulled on my boots, zipped up my coat, and stepped outside. Snow had started falling, light, sparse flakes that melted as soon as they touched the ground. I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel for a while. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just watched the windshield fog slowly from the inside. That night, back at my apartment, I checked the transfers one last time to make sure they had been canceled. They had. I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls and 2 texts from Isolde. "We need to talk. This isn't how family handles things." I didn't reply, because they weren't trying to talk. They were trying to regroup. I knew how they worked. They didn't chase after me. They plotted instead. They didn't chase after me. They plotted instead. It began the very next morning. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee when Martin called. The screen flashed, "Dad," as if the word still applied. I let it ring until voicemail picked up. 30 seconds later, the message came through. "You don't live here anymore. Don't come back." No greeting, no pause, just that flat, clipped tone I'd heard since I was 10 years old. The kind of voice that only came out when he felt insulted, and apparently refusing to bankroll their household made me a traitor. 15 minutes later, I received a text from Isolde. "We thought you were better than this." No punctuation, no apology, just another layer of passive aggression wrapped in disappointment, like all her love notes had been. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed 2 empty boxes from my coat closet, drove back to the house, and let myself into the garage. The lock hadn't changed. Of course not. Security was never for them. Only from me. Inside, the air was stale with paint thinner and dust. I quietly packed up what little I had left in that house. A set of photo albums Aunt Celine had saved for me. A bag of old science fair trophies no one ever displayed. A raincoat I'd forgotten I owned. That was it. No one came out. No one said goodbye. I loaded the boxes into the trunk of my car and drove off without looking in the rearview mirror. That chapter, at least, I could close on my own terms. But their chapter was just getting started. 2 days later, I was tagged in a Facebook post by someone I barely remembered from high school. It was a shared image from Callista's page. Raised a millionaire, abandoned by her. Below it was a picture of Martin in bed, looking frail and overdramatic, clutching his chest like a soap opera character. The caption read, "Left to suffer by the one we gave everything." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, neighbors, distant cousins, church ladies who hadn't spoken to me in years. She always seemed off. Well, not everyone appreciates their blessings. I saw her once at Kroger, rude as can be. I scrolled in disbelief, watching people construct a narrative about me like I was a villain in a made-for-TV movie. And the worst part? No one asked if any of it was true. The next blow came 3 days later when a courier arrived at my office with a manila envelope. No return address, but I didn't need one. I already knew. Inside, a legal document, a civil action notice. The plaintiffs, Martin and Isolde Avery, were accusing me of emotional neglect, abandonment of elderly parents, and public defamation of character. I blinked, read the pages twice. Then I slid the papers across my desk to my attorney, Miranda. She'd been with me since my first consulting contract. She barely raised an eyebrow. "It's weak," she said, flipping through the allegations, "but loud and public." That was the point. They didn't want to win. They wanted to shame me. So I gave them the one thing they'd never expected, a full, detailed response. That night, I built a portfolio that would make a forensic accountant proud. Every bank statement from the last 5 years, $7,000 a month sent without fail, every 30th to Isolde's account. Callista's car lease, signed under my name, photos, signatures, even the timestamp on the notary's digital file. Pharmacy receipts for Martin's medications, ordered and paid for from my card. Catering invoices from 2 Christmases ago, because apparently we can't afford a holiday dinner, meant, "You'll cover it, right?" Tuition letters for Lily's marketing program, along with the wire receipts from my business account. I labeled each file clearly, cross-referenced dates, created a timeline. At the top of the binder, I wrote in bold, "Let them bring it to court." The next morning, I got a call from a local TV station. A woman named Amanda from Channel 12. She was working on a segment about elder neglect and said Callista had come forward with a story about her estranged tech mogul sister. I didn't yell. I didn't panic. I thanked Amanda for the call and politely declined the interview. Then I forwarded her the legal documents I had received, along with proof of payment summaries and a short statement. I wrote, "Please find enclosed the civil suit served to me by the individuals claiming neglect. Supporting evidence is attached. I trust you value accuracy in your reporting." She didn't respond, but the segment never aired. Still, Callista wasn't done. That afternoon, my company's Instagram was tagged in a viral TikTok. The video was a montage of family photos, dramatic piano music, and Callista crying on camera. "She said she loved us," she wept into the lens. "But when we needed her most, she disappeared." Hashtags flooded in. Hashtag heartless, hashtag family betrayal. When money changes. People. The video got 92,000 views in 2 days. I activated a legal takedown, sent a cease and desist, and then I did the hardest thing of all. I said nothing, because I knew what they were really afraid of. Me speaking clearly. Me stepping into the light they worked so hard to steal. Me, in court, with facts, not feelings. But I wasn't done. I had one place left to reclaim. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in tone. the kind of sterile, echoing quiet that made every footstep sound accusatory. I arrived early, as I always did, holding a worn leather folder in my arms. It wasn't fancy, but it held years of silence organized into neat rows of evidence. I didn't bring anyone with me, no entourage, no moral support, no dramatic tears, just me and a record of what they had taken. As I walked through the security checkpoint, the guard gave me a nod. He had probably seen 1,000 people like me, nervous, quiet, holding too much weight in their hands. I thanked him and moved forward. Callista, Martin, and Isolde arrived together. Callista in heels too loud for a courthouse, Isolde draped in her usual air of false fragility, Martin wearing a blazer like it was armor. The three of them looked like they had coordinated outfits and narratives. Behind them, a local reporter whispered to her cameraman, angling for a shot. I didn't give her one. I kept walking until I reached the courtroom door. I stood for a moment, hand on the handle. This time, I don't sit in the hallway. I walk into the center. Inside, the judge looked young. Too young, but focused. The court clerk called the case, and we all stood. My attorney, Miranda, placed her files on the desk, unbothered, calm. She knew this was theater. She also knew we'd rehearsed better. The plaintiffs presented their statement first. Martin stood. His voice cracked at all the right moments. We raised her. We gave her everything. She was ungrateful. She turned her back on us. We were humiliated, emotionally and publicly, and all we asked for was recognition. Callista took the stand next. She's been jealous since we were kids, she said with a sigh. I tried to include her in everything. I even helped her start her company. But she started lashing out when people started recognizing me. And now she's trying to erase us. Then came the phrase that almost made Miranda snort. She exploited our family image for her own gain. My turn. Miranda stood. No dramatic gestures. No raised voice. Your Honor, she said, we have receipts. The courtroom dimmed slightly as the projector turned on. The first slide showed 10 consecutive years of bank transfers, $7,000 monthly, always on time, dates, amounts, routing numbers. Then came the screenshots. Callista's TEDx draft, side by side with my MBA thesis. Highlighted lines. Identical phrasing. Next, forged signatures on a vehicle lease, verified by a forensic specialist. Then, social media posts using my company's brand name without permission, tagging inflammatory hashtags. Finally, a string of text messages and emails, including one where Isolde referred to me as a walking virus. Another where Martin wrote, she's not really part of this family anymore. The room shifted. No one gasped, but people leaned forward. The press scribbled faster. Even the judge's brows drew in. Martin stood, voice louder this time. None of this matters. We raised her. She owes us her life. I stood. No, I said. You raised a reputation. I raised myself. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. I spoke only once more during the trial. When the judge asked if I had anything to add, I walked to the evidence cart, lifted a manila envelope, and handed it over. Inside was a letter from Aunt Celine, written years ago, after one of the many Thanksgivings I spent at her place instead of home. It wasn't emotional, just factual. She listed the number of times I'd been dropped off due to illness. Included a note. Varela always packed her own bag. No one else ever did. Isolde broke down on the stand. I didn't mean to erase her, she sobbed. I just didn't know how to juggle it all. I wanted to keep the family together. The judge didn't flinch. You cannot preserve family by erasing one member from it. The room quieted again. 30 minutes later, the ruling was clear. The case was dismissed with prejudice. All claims against me invalidated. I was advised to pursue counterclaims if I chose to. I didn't respond. Not there, not then. I simply stood, gathered my folder, and walked out. No cameras, no mic drop, no victory speech, just the sound of my heels echoing in a space that finally felt neutral. As I stepped into the winter air, a breeze swept through the parking lot, lifting the edge of my coat. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the cold settle against my skin. I had survived the house, I had survived the courtroom, but I wasn't done. I had one place left to reclaim. The court ruling was over. The final document, signed, sealed, notarized, had been filed and stored away. Official, final, uncontested. I walked out of the courthouse, not with elation, not with the cinematic feeling of triumph, but with a single manila folder clutched in one hand and an unnameable vacancy in my chest. No cheering, no fists raised in vindication, just silence. And not the peaceful kind. It felt like the echo after a party ends. After the guests go home, after the music cuts off mid-chorus, after the lights flicker on too bright and the confetti becomes clutter. That strange, unsettled quiet, where nothing has gone wrong, but something is clearly missing. That feeling trailed me for days, until Tuesday morning. I was midway through pouring my second cup of coffee when my inbox pinged. I didn't think much of it, spam probably. A sale, a calendar alert, a newsletter I never subscribed to. But the subject line gave me pause. Property auction notification, delinquent tax seizure. The parcel address hit me like a wave crashing too fast, 320 Rosewood Lane. The house I'd grown up in, the house that never held a photo of me on the mantle, that coughed me out like a seasonal allergy, as if I was the contaminant ruining the air. The house where every accusation had roots and no apology had leaves. They hadn't paid the taxes. After everything, after the courtroom dramatics and social media speeches about family values and dignity under pressure, they'd let it slip away. Not for betrayal or secrets or lies, for money, for unpaid property levies they were too proud or too careless to manage. I stared at the screen, not angry, not shocked, just still. Then I clicked Add to Calendar under the auction notice. No hesitation, no fanfare. I didn't tell anyone. Not Miranda, not Celine, not even Joelle, who would have made a celebratory playlist and insisted on driving me there with cupcakes in the passenger seat. I showed up alone. Sat in the back, behind sunglasses and a long trench coat like I was protecting my anonymity, though no one was looking. I watched silently while flippers, investors, and hopeful renovators drove up the price with quick nods and numbers on notepads. Then, at the perfect moment, when interest had peaked and plateaued, I made my move. I bid, not high, not flashy, just enough to win. And I did. The house was mine. 2 weeks later, I returned to 320 Rosewood Lane. Not as a daughter, not as a ghost returning for closure, not as a trespasser, but as the legal owner. I walked through the front door and was met with the same creaking hinges that had startled me as a child. The smell of aged pine sol clung to the baseboards. Mothballs lingered in the coat closet. The floor whined under my weight the same way it had when I was 5, sneaking into the kitchen past bedtime. Some things hadn't changed. The wallpaper still peeled in long strips behind the refrigerator. The outlet in the hallway still didn't work. There was a crack in the upstairs window frame I remembered tracing with my finger during thunderstorms. Familiar and forgotten, I walked the room slowly, not searching for anything, just acknowledging. There was the living room where Lily had pitched her first tantrum because she didn't get the doll with the pink dress. The kitchen where Isolde used to tell me I was in the way when she practiced her grown-up recipes. The dining room, oh, that dining room, where Martin had once said straight-faced, "No one likes a girl who corrects people." Upstairs, I stopped at what used to be my room. The door had been painted over, bland beige now, no trace of the teal trim I'd begged for one summer. The old "Keep Out" sign was long gone. Inside, the room was empty, stripped, except for one cardboard box shoved in the corner, sealed with yellowing tape. I crouched down. The label was faded but legible. Grandma, Keepsakes. I peeled the tape gently. Inside, yellowed holiday cards, delicate doilies, an old crocheted shawl, a dried bouquet wrapped in crinkled ribbon, and at the very bottom, wrapped in tissue, lay the silver brooch, the one Grandma Celine pinned to my coat that night. That night, they sent me away with tears in her eyes and a whisper in my ear. Every brave girl needs a shield. I held it in my hand, cold, heavy, solid. It didn't burn, but it pulsed. 3 days later, I moved in. Not because I needed the space. My modern condo downtown, with the clean lines, the minimalist lighting, the new appliances, was still mine. But this house owed me a conversation. So I gave it one. I unpacked slowly, intentionally. No rush. I filled the space with lavender-scented candles, warm lighting, soft throw blankets. I set up a standing desk in the dining room, my dining room now, where I planned to work remotely. I brought in books, rugs, mugs, but no shrines, no family portraits, just one photo. On the mantel, a frame. Inside, a picture of me and Grandma Celine on the back porch, caught mid-laughter. Her hand rests on my shoulder. My eyes are squinted from sunlight, not from sadness, just light, no parents, no sisters, just her and me. 3 days into living there, a message pinged across my phone. Callista. It was never about the money. I was scared you'd leave us. I read it once, twice, then I deleted it. Deleted the thread. Deleted the contact from my phone. Some things don't deserve storage space. That Sunday morning, I brewed coffee, sat at my new desk, and opened my laptop. Through the window, I saw the old rose bush near the fence, still standing, still blooming. Despite years of neglect, of frost and dry seasons, it had survived. That afternoon, I walked out to the garden. The soil was compacted, tough, but not dead. I dug my fingers into the earth and smiled. I'd learned how to make things grow, even in places others gave up on. Back inside, I pinned the silver brooch to the collar of my sweater. It glinted in the afternoon sun, silent and strong. I stood in the doorway and whispered aloud. They called me a virus. Then I paused, let the air carry it. But I rebuilt a life no shame could touch. I stood there until dusk, until the sky shifted from orange to navy, then to black velvet scattered with stars. Inside, the house was quiet, not empty. And that was the difference. The difference was me. Some families don't break you with fists or words. They do it with silence, expectation, and entitlement. But sometimes the quietest person in the room becomes the one who finally says, enough. What would you do if the people who raised you believed they owned your success? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real-life revenge stories that speak to the strength behind quiet resilience, don't forget to subscribe. More powerful stories are on the way.
Hello, my name is Sandra, and on my birthday, my husband smiled at me, raised a glass, and tried to poison me. I didn't drink it. I switched the glasses. That night was supposed to be special. Instead, it was the first thread that unraveled everything. Fake medical files, a forged diagnosis, betrayal from his best friend, and even his mother calling me dangerous on national TV. He didn't just lie. He built a whole story to erase mine. And yet, I'm still here. I fought back. I exposed them all. My 42nd birthday was supposed to be a celebration of love, not a performance in survival. The parlor was humming with soft jazz, polished silverware, and quiet laughter. Candlelight flickered across the tablecloth, and beyond the tall windows, Charlotte's skyline sparkled like a stage backdrop. Wesley reached across the table, poured my wine, and smiled like nothing had changed. But everything had. He looked too polished tonight, his navy blazer, his Rolex, the way he said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart," with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. It used to. That smile once melted every doubt in me. Lately, it froze them. We clinked glasses. "To you, Sandra," he said. My fingers tightened around the stem. Something in his voice felt rehearsed, like he was playing a part he no longer enjoyed. As he raised his glass, I caught a strange flick of movement. Wesley had adjusted my glass before I sat down. Quick, deliberate, almost too quick. My stomach clenched. Maybe it was just nerves. Or maybe it was the way he'd been acting the last few weeks. Distant, jittery, whispering on phone calls when he thought I was asleep. The wine sat untouched between us. Dark red, smooth. He watched me. I watched the wine. A young waitress leaned in politely. "Excuse me, ma'am," she murmured. "Could I have a moment, privately?" Wesley raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. I followed her past the bar, heels clicking against tile, heart slamming against my ribs. We stopped near the hallway leading to the restrooms. She looked maybe 20, braid tight, eyes wide. "My name's Tamika," she whispered, glancing around. "I shouldn't be saying this, but I saw your husband. He put something in your glass." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "I was at the bar. He poured from a small vial into your wine while you were texting. I didn't know what to do. I almost didn't say anything, but it looked wrong. Really wrong." Tamika's hands trembled. I'd want someone to tell me if it was me. My breath caught. It felt absurd, like a bad TV plot. Wesley? Poisoning me? He wasn't perfect, sure. He'd become evasive, maybe even cold. But this? Still, her fear was raw. Not dramatic. Genuine. I thought back to the hush-hush call at 2 a.m., the late-night meetings, the sudden interest in my firm's finances. Wesley wasn't who he used to be. "Thank you," I said, steadying my voice. Back at the table, I sat with a smile like armor. He leaned in again. "You okay?" I nodded, fake laughing. "This wine's too good to rush," I said. He chuckled and turned to his phone. That's when I swapped our glasses, subtle, fluid, like I'd done it 100 times. A stretch of the arm, a casual nudge. Now his was in front of me, mine in front of him. He never noticed. He lifted the glass again. "To you, Sandra." And I watched him drink. The glass was still on the table when he slumped forward, chest heaving like he couldn't breathe. Gasps rippled across the room as I stood, calm but alert. I reached for the napkin, careful and calculated, and wrapped it tightly around the stem of my glass, the one he'd meant for me. I slipped it into my purse just before the manager rushed over. "Is he okay?" someone asked. "I don't know," I answered, my voice low but steady. I didn't move to help him. I watched. The ambulance came fast. Everything after that was flashing lights, forms, questions I didn't answer. I told the EMTs he'd had wine and seemed to react badly, and I rode in the front seat to the ER without a word more. In the waiting room, the cheap fluorescent lights buzzed like a warning. I sat alone as Wesley was wheeled into a curtained bay, surrounded by medical staff trying to save the man who had tried to poison me. Tamika appeared 15 minutes later, her apron gone, wearing a hoodie and jeans. She walked toward me like she was afraid to be seen. "You came," I said. "I couldn't just go home," she whispered, sitting beside me. "You okay?" "I don't know," I replied, clutching my purse. "But you might have saved my life." She nodded once. Then I stood and approached the front desk. The nurse blinked when I asked if I could speak to a police officer. 10 minutes later, a female detective in plain clothes walked in. Her name was Carla Rogers. Tall, no-nonsense, hair pulled tight. She gestured to a private area just past the vending machines. Tamika followed me. I handed over the napkin-wrapped glass like it was a ticking bomb. "This was supposed to be mine," I told her, but I switched it. My husband drank it instead. Tamika gave her statement. I could see Detective Rogers' eyes narrow as she took notes, piecing it together like a puzzle she'd solved before. "We'll send this in for testing immediately," she said, securing the glass. "And I'll pull the restaurant's security footage. Don't worry. If he did something, we'll find it." She gave me her card and promised to call in the morning. Tamika hugged me, tight, brief, and then left without another word. It was nearly 4 a.m. when I finally got home. The condo felt colder than usual, too quiet. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just dropped my purse on the table, kicked off my shoes, and stared out the window. He meant to drug me. Why? My phone rang at 7:43 a.m. I hadn't slept a second. "Mrs. Harper?" said the voice on the other end, calm and clipped. "Detective Rogers. We reviewed the footage. I think you need to come in." By 9 a.m., I was sitting in a narrow interview room at the Charlotte Police Department. A monitor on the wall played muted footage from the restaurant. There he was, Wesley, glancing over his shoulder, eyes darting, pulling something small and silver from his jacket. A vial. Clear. He tilted it over my glass and gave a flick of his wrist. Seconds later, Tamika entered the frame in the background. The timestamp matched. It was undeniable. "That qualifies as criminal tampering with intent to cause harm," Rogers said. "Depending on the test results, it could go further." I said nothing for a long moment. Then I asked, "Do you think this was the first time he's tried something like this?" Rogers gave me a look I couldn't read. "Do you?" "That night at the condo, I didn't rest. I couldn't. Instead, I called Gloria Penn, my old friend, and more importantly, my attorney. I need you, I said, and not just for divorce. Gloria didn't ask questions. She just told me to come by her office the next morning. I hung up and stood in front of Wesley's desk. It had always been locked, but I knew where he kept the key. I opened the top drawer slowly. Inside was a red folder with my name on it. I pulled the folder out slowly, the weight of it unnatural in my hands. The red cover wasn't labeled in any way, just clean and ominous. I set it down on Wesley's desk, heart thrumming beneath my skin, then opened it. The first page hit like a slap. Legal backups, it read. The second? Cognitive assessment, Sandra Harper. There it was, my name, a bold header. Underneath, a letterhead I didn't recognize. Dr. William Tannard, board-certified psychiatrist. The words felt sticky, unreal. Preliminary diagnosis, early onset cognitive decline. I blinked. Once, twice. The room didn't shift, but everything inside me did. It listed symptoms: forgetfulness, paranoia, disorganized thinking, dates I never remembered, an online consultation I never had, a signature, typed, not inked, and a notary seal I'd never seen before in my life. I flipped through the rest, emails printed out, subject lines like next steps guardianship and bank cosign forms. My breath snagged. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was strategy. Wesley hadn't planned to kill me. He planned to replace me. Maybe the wine was plan B, because plan A was power of attorney. I thought back to all those casual comments. You're forgetting a lot lately. Maybe I should manage the bills. Let me handle the bank stuff, baby. It hadn't felt right then. Now, it felt calculated. What disturbed me most was how reasonable it all looked. It was designed to be believed. Smart, I whispered to the empty room, but not smart enough. I kept going. Attached was a guardianship draft petition. His name as petitioner. My supposed incapacity detailed in cold bullet points. He was trying to declare me unfit, strip me of everything, legally, publicly, permanently. I slammed the folder shut. There was no more doubt. Wesley wasn't acting impulsively. He'd built this for weeks, maybe longer. I grabbed my phone. Gloria answered on the first ring. We're past divorce, I said, voice clear. This is war. I'll clear my afternoon, she replied. Bring the whole thing. I hung up. My pulse slowed, then quickened again, because something gnawed at me. Wesley wouldn't leave this folder out, not if he thought I'd be alone here. I glanced around the room. That's when I noticed the second phone, his old work cell, plugged in and blinking on the floor. It had a missed call. From Tom. I stared at the blinking screen for a second longer, then shut the drawer. Tom. Wesley's oldest friend, his golf buddy, legal advisor, best man at our wedding. The kind of man who toasted loyalty, but billed you by the hour. By the time I reached Gloria's office downtown, the humidity outside was thick enough to choke. I stepped inside the cool, glassy lobby and rode the elevator up, folder clutched like it could bite. When I opened the door to her suite, there he was. Tom, sitting on Gloria's sofa like he belonged there, grinning at something she'd just said. Sandra! Gloria stood and waved me in. Tom was just dropping off a motion for another client. Total coincidence. Tom turned, all polished charm. Sandra, you look... well. I don't feel it, I said, matching his fake smile with one of my own. We exchanged a few pleasantries while I handed Gloria the red folder. I kept one eye on Tom, who didn't seem to notice, or maybe pretended not to. As Gloria flipped through the forged medical report, something caught my eye. At the corner of one document, barely visible, were faint handwritten initials. T.S. My spine stiffened. I glanced up just as Tom reached for a bottled water, his wedding band glinting under the light. Calm. Too calm. Tom, I said lightly, do you know a Dr. William Tannard? He paused, bottle half twisted. Name rings a bell. Why? Just wondering, I replied, folding my arms. He seems to think I have early onset dementia. Gloria's eyes darted up. Tom laughed too fast. That must be a mistake. I leaned forward, pulled out the sheet with his initials, and laid it flat on the table. Then explain this. Tom's smile faltered. Look, sometimes Wesley asks for help drafting legal formats. I didn't. This wasn't meant to be used. You thought it wouldn't matter because no one would see it. I said, cold now. Because I'd be out of the picture. Gloria stood slowly, pressing her lips into a tight line. Tom, she said, voice thin, you need to leave. He looked between us, betrayed by the very people who used to trust him. He mumbled something about misunderstandings and walked out without meeting my eyes. I turned to Gloria. From this point on, you can't speak to him again, not even for brunch or a golf game. You have my word, she said, jaw clenched. I tucked the folder back into my bag and exhaled. This wasn't about Wesley anymore. This was about every person who stood behind him. I left Gloria's office with the weight of war pressing behind my eyes. My phone buzzed before I even reached the parking garage. It was Michelle, my assistant. Turn on Channel 5, now. I didn't ask why. I opened the local news app and saw the headline. Exclusive, Wesley Creighton's mother speaks out. On screen was Ba Creighton, sitting primly in her Sunday best, eyes red-rimmed but dry. The reporter fed her the cue. She says her daughter-in-law has been showing signs of emotional instability, possibly paranoia. I'm scared for my son, Ba Creighton said, her voice trembling. Sandra isn't well. She needs help, not handcuffs. I stood in the parking lot, the world turning to static. My hands went cold. Within the hour, hashtags trended. #FreeWesley, #Protect the Creightons. Old photos of me at charity events, cropped and twisted, resurfaced. I hadn't even left the city, yet the court of public opinion had already condemned me. My inbox was flooded. You're a fraud. You heard him, didn't you? One even called me a gold digger. A laughable insult given I made more than Wesley ever did. Then came the leaked footage, grainy from a distance, showing me leaving the restaurant. The angle made it look like I was fleeing, like I had something to hide. I slammed the condo door behind me and sat on the floor, my back against the wall. Don't let them control the narrative, Gloria had said earlier. Stay silent, we'll win this in court. But my business was bleeding. Clients emailed in concern. A few had already paused retainers. I couldn't stay silent. That night, I filmed a short video in my living room. No makeup, no tears, just truth. I am cooperating fully with the police. I won't respond to slander, but I will say this. No one gets to rewrite my life while I'm still living it. The next morning, I sent Wesley's attorney a cease and desist. Attached was a message I knew would reach him. If you push this further, I'll bring it all out. Your lies, your files, your friends. Choose carefully. The day after I released my video, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail. No caller ID. Miss Sandra, it's Tamika. Someone came by the diner. They asked if I was here legally. They said they had documents. I think I'm being watched. I froze. Wesley had decided if he couldn't discredit me directly, he'd poison the roots beneath me. Tamika was the only witness brave enough to step forward, and now he was trying to crush her too. I drove out to her apartment that afternoon. It was a modest building outside Charlotte, nothing fancy. I found her standing by the mailbox, arms crossed, chin high, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Inside, she showed me an envelope. No return address, no stamp, just her name, and inside, a photocopy of an ICE complaint form, blank, but threatening enough. They left this taped to my door, she said. I looked at her and said, we can fight this. I'll hire you protection, a lawyer, whatever you need. She shook her head. If I hide, I lose. He wins. And women like you keep losing too. I didn't know whether to hug her or cry, but I nodded. That night, Tamika went on camera, calm, clear, no tears. I saw Mr. Creighton drop something into her drink, she said. I watched him do it. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't right. The station released the interview at 10 p.m. sharp. By 10:07, the internet had a new hero. #believe Tamika. People started seeing through the noise. I saw comments shift. She's brave. This changes everything. Even a few from Wesley's old supporters admitted they were wrong. By morning, Gloria had filed witness protection paperwork for Tamika, and I sent out a public statement. Tamika spoke when it mattered. We stand by her, and we won't back down. Wesley's team went silent. No new headlines, no more quotes from his lawyer, just stillness. But that night, as I poured myself tea, the phone rang again. It was Gloria. Her voice was tight. They've moved the hearing up, 48 hours. The courthouse doors swung open with the weight of months behind them. The press lined the sidewalk, microphones raised, camera flashes echoing like gunshots. Gloria kept her hand steady on my elbow, but my legs moved on muscle memory. I wasn't scared, not anymore. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Curious eyes, half-familiar faces from the news cycle. Then Wesley entered, flanked by his lawyer. Tom, so much for loyalty. Wesley looked thinner, his hair neater, suit sharper. A carefully curated mess designed to say, "I've been suffering too." It was classic Wesley, messaging over meaning. The hearing opened with procedural noise, but when Wesley took the stand, everything shifted. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said, "I never wanted to hurt her. I loved Sandra. I still do." I clenched my jaw. He turned toward me, just slightly. She was my world. If I acted out of desperation, it was because I didn't know how to save us. Somewhere in the room, someone sighed. A juror wiped their eye. It was working. Then came the real hit. Tom produced a flash drive. On it? An alleged voicemail. My voice, trembling, broken, muttering threats of self-harm. I could barely breathe as it played. Except it wasn't me. Gloria stood so quickly her chair scraped back. "We object. That's a deep fake." The judge narrowed his eyes. Recess granted. The tech analyst brought in was clear. "This file has been AI altered, spliced, fabricated." Back in session, Wesley shifted uncomfortably, his act crumbling by the second. During recess, he caught me alone near the hallway window. "This doesn't have to be a war," he said softly. "Let's end this, together, you and me." I met his eyes without blinking. "The woman who would have fallen for that lie? She died the night you drugged me." I turned and walked back to the courtroom. We were almost done, but I wasn't done with him. The gavel hadn't fallen yet, but my words weighed heavier than any verdict. Just before the judge was about to speak, I rose. "Your Honor," I began. "Whatever your sentence, please understand, this is bigger than a marriage gone bad. It's about the way systems protect those who manipulate. It's about people like Tamika who risk everything to do the right thing. I ask not just for justice, but for a warning to anyone who thinks a courtroom is just another game board." The judge nodded, solemn. Then he read the verdict. Wesley, guilty on all counts, attempted poisoning, document forgery, obstruction of justice, 15 years, no parole. He didn't flinch. His jaw tightened, his eyes dull, like the performance had finally run dry. His mother, seated 3 rows behind, let out a whimper. Quiet, but it echoed. Outside, cameras flared again. This time, they caught not just the fall of a man, but the rise of a survivor. 3 days later, I stood behind a podium, beside Tamika, launching glass unbroken. The name said it all. "This organization will fight for women pushed to silence," I announced. "For every Tamika who was told to look away. For every Sandra who almost didn't make it." Tamika smiled beside me, a small, steady kind of pride. By week's end, I signed final papers stepping away from my firm. Gloria took the reins. I walked out of that office not with loss, but with clarity. Now, I live near Lake Lure, a cottage with peeling paint and wild lavender. I plant things that don't ask much. I paint badly. I sleep deeply. No cameras, no courtrooms, no Wesley. I didn't just survive him. I dismantled the machine that built him. The mornings here arrive without alarms, just golden light spilling through linen curtains and the soft trill of birds I still don't know by name. I drink my coffee black now, bitter, honest, no sweeteners, no illusions. That morning I opened my sketchbook on the porch and started with loose lines. Nothing complicated, just movement. Rhythm. My hands no longer shook. The mail came late, as usual. Among catalogs and charity requests was an envelope with familiar handwriting. Wesley's mother. I opened it on the kitchen counter. "I didn't know," it read. "Maybe I didn't want to, but I regret what happened to you. That's all I can say." There was no apology, but I didn't expect one. Closure isn't something someone gives you. You claim it. I folded the letter once, then slid it into the drawer beside the sink, under takeout menus and receipts. Let the past sit where it belonged. Later that week, Gloria called. Tom had been formally charged. Ethical violations, aiding fraud, perjury. His license was on ice pending full investigation. Wesley hadn't filed an appeal. No surprise. His world had shrunk to a cell and cold metal bars. Maybe that's the first honest thing he's touched in years. Tamika's voice had appeared in a podcast about courtroom justice. She spoke with clarity that couldn't be taught. I sent her flowers. No card. Last Sunday, I drove out to the parlor. I sat at the same table by the window, ordered tea, watched the light bend over the silverware. No one approached me. Good. This week I finished a painting. A wine glass, cracked through but stitched with gold leaf in every fracture. I called it not broken, just rebuilt. I wrapped it carefully, added a short note, and mailed it to the courthouse. For the next woman who stands here, because scars shouldn't be hidden, they should shine. As I sit here with paint-stained fingers and silence I no longer fear, I realize something. Healing doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for truth. If my story reminds you of your own, if you've ever doubted your worth because someone tried to rewrite your reality, hear me now. You are not broken. You are becoming. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, "You made it." I learned that strength isn't loud. It's choosing peace when rage is easier. It's walking away when staying would be self-betrayal. And it's loving yourself so fiercely that no one else's version of you stands a chance. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever ignored your instincts to keep the peace? Do you believe people can change? Or do we just get better at hiding who we are? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone. If this story moved you, made you think, cry, or breathe deeper, drop a 1 in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Or if it didn't hit you at all, tell me why. I welcome every voice here. And if you want more stories that challenge, heal, and connect, subscribe to this channel. We're just getting started. See you in the next chapter.
Hi, I'm Lumen. And on my 18th birthday, my mom blindfolded me, smiled, said, "Time for your real gift," then drove me 200 miles out and left me at a gas station. No suitcase, no goodbye. Just the sound of gravel under her tires and the laughter of my sister echoing through an open window. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been planning it. Quietly. Legally. Weeks in advance. My name disappeared from the deed, my college fund vanished, and my family posted a brunch photo titled Freedom Day. Was it ever about love? Or was I just a role they needed to retire? What kind of mother calls exile a gift? I didn't expect anything special that morning. 18 felt like a number, not a milestone. But when I stepped out of my room and saw my mother, Valora, standing in the kitchen with a tray of eggs, toast, and orange juice, I froze. She hadn't cooked breakfast since I was 10. "Happy birthday, Lumen," she said, setting the tray on the table like it was any ordinary Tuesday. "Get dressed. Today's your real gift. You'll never forget it." I stood there longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to ask what the catch was, but a softer part, quieter, tired, wanted to believe maybe something had shifted. Maybe turning 18 meant I was finally enough. She waited in the car. When I opened the door, there was a folded silk scarf in her hand. "No peeking. It's part of the surprise," she said with a rehearsed laugh. I raised an eyebrow, half joking. "You're not driving me to a ditch, are you?" Her lips twitched. "Don't be ridiculous." The scarf blocked everything: sunlight, context, direction. But I could tell we were heading out of Asheville. I recognized the way the road smoothed, then turned to cracked stretches flanked by open fields. The car was quiet. Too quiet. She kept the radio off. Instead, she filled the silence with questions I hadn't heard from her in years. "How's school really going? You seeing anyone? Do you think you'll stay close to home after graduation?" Every question came with a sugar-coated tone, too sweet to be real. My answers were cautious. She didn't interrupt, but she didn't listen either. No one else was in the car. Not my father. Not Callista. It hit me somewhere after the third highway exit. Every other birthday, no matter how minimal, involved the family. A cake? A sarcastic card? Something. This year, it was just us. And even that felt too deliberate. We drove for almost 3 hours. Every time I thought we'd stop, we didn't. Just long stretches of nothing. Until the car slowed down, gravel crunching under the tires. "This is it," she said. Her voice changed. "No more syrup." She got out, opened my door, and helped me out like I was delicate. "Wait right here," she said, the tone brisk now. "Don't take the blindfold off until I tell you." The sound of her heels on gravel faded quickly. Then the car door slammed. Then, silence. I waited 10 seconds, maybe 20, but the engine roared back to life. Tires spun, and she was gone. I ripped off the blindfold. I was standing at a rundown gas station, somewhere between forgotten farmland and a place nobody would look for me. Dust curled into the air as her car disappeared into the horizon. No balloons, no cake. Just cracked concrete and a vending machine that buzzed like it was dying. I turned slowly, trying to process what had just happened. There wasn't even a bench. Inside the station, a man behind the counter blinked when he saw me. He looked me over. Blue dress, hair done, mascara now clumping. "You all right, miss?" "My mom left," I said. "I need to make a call." He handed me his landline like it wasn't the strangest request he'd had all day. I dialed her cell with shaking fingers. She picked up on the second ring. "You're 18 now," Valora said flatly. "This is your start. You wanted independence. Go earn it." Then she hung up. I called again, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Back outside, I sat on the curb and stared at the road. The heat rose in waves from the pavement. I took off my shoes and pressed my bare feet to the ground, trying to feel something, trying to prove I was still real. I wanted to cry, or scream, or run. But none of those would have changed the fact that this was real. Was it a punishment? A statement? A clean break? A part of me kept whispering, maybe she thought this would help you grow. But deeper down, the truth was louder. She wanted me gone, fully, quietly. I sat there for I don't know how long. Cars came and went. None stopped. The sky turned a different shade of blue, one that felt lonelier. A low rumble pulled my attention to the side. A pickup truck pulled into the lot. Faded paint, dust-caked windows. The man who stepped out looked like he belonged to the road. Sun-streaked skin, worn boots, a faded cap. He glanced my way, paused, then walked over slowly. "You okay, kid?" he asked, voice low but not unkind. I hesitated, swallowing the lump in my throat. "No," I said, "but I think I need help." He sat beside me on the curb without a word at first, his presence steady, unthreatening. The kind of quiet most people don't know how to offer. I didn't cry. That part of me had already shut off. "Want to tell me what happened?" he asked after a moment, not looking directly at me, but scanning the horizon like he was giving me space to lie or not. "My mom left me here. I don't know why," I said. My voice sounded too even, like I'd already accepted it. Or maybe I was afraid if I said it with feeling, I'd shatter in front of this stranger. He nodded once, slow, then reached into the cab of his truck and pulled out a bottle of water. "You got somewhere safe to go?" I took the bottle, hesitating. "No, I was supposed to. It doesn't matter." He didn't press, just stood and said, "I'm heading toward Little Rock. There's a bus depot not far from there. I can drop you, no strings." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked to borrow his phone. I still wanted to believe that someone would reach for me if I reached out first. He handed me the phone, unlocked. I dialed Janie. She picked up on the third ring, voice bright. "Lumen? Oh my God, I was just talking about your birthday. How's the surprise?" I exhaled hard. "Janie, listen, I need help. My mom, she left me. I don't know where I am. Some gas station in Arkansas. She drove me here and just left." Silence on the other end. Then her tone shifted. "Wait, what? Are you sure this isn't just another one of your family drama things? Maybe your mom's just giving you space? She dropped me here, took my purse, drove away. That's not space." "I just think maybe she's trying some tough love thing." You know, push you to fly kind of deal. Janie, I'm stranded. A pause. Then, look, just don't blow this out of proportion. Maybe take a breath before making it a thing. The line went dead a second after I said her name again. I handed the phone back to the man. Guess I'm headed to Little Rock. He didn't say anything, just nodded like he understood more than I'd told him. We climbed into his truck, the engine rumbling like it had something to prove. We didn't talk. I appreciated that. The ride stretched under a sun that kept glaring through the windshield. I counted exit signs and tried not to count thoughts. Every time I started to feel something, anger, grief, even relief, I shut it down. He dropped me near the bus depot with a short, "Take care of yourself, kid." "I will," I said, meaning it more than I expected. The bus station was the opposite of welcoming. The walls were stained with years of comings and goings, of stories like mine and worse. The clerk behind the counter barely looked up when I asked about buses to Asheville. "Next one's tomorrow. You can wait inside till we close, but overnight you'll need to figure out your own spot." I found a corner near a plug and sat. My phone was dead, so I plugged it in, just waiting for enough juice to light up the screen. Around me, life moved. People argued, kids cried. A man across the room cursed at a vending machine that stole his last dollar. None of it touched me. I watched a woman in scrubs tie her child's shoes, adjust his tiny backpack, and kiss the top of his head. She whispered something, and he giggled, clinging to her for a second longer than needed. It didn't hurt because it reminded me of what I'd missed. It hurt because I'd never had it to begin with. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, my phone lit up. A notification. Instagram. Callista posted a photo. "Just us girls today. Finally free." There they were, my mother and my sister, sitting at a trendy brunch spot with mimosas, smiles like toothpaste ads. A cake between them with pink frosting and gold candles. The caption read, "Family healing grateful." I stared at the screen until it dimmed, unsure if I wanted to scream, cry, or just delete myself from their history altogether. I held the paper like it was a lifeline. For the first time in days, I felt like someone, somewhere, still believed I mattered. The ride back to Asheville wasn't easy to afford, but I made it work with the emergency fare card Merrick had quietly slipped into my backpack before he left. I didn't ask for it, but I didn't reject it either. Pride doesn't keep you warm at night or get you home. Home. That word didn't mean what it used to. By the time I reached the driveway, it was late morning. The same trees lined the sidewalk. The same potted plants Callista had arranged, like it was a staged home for a catalog shoot. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I knocked. No answer. The housekeeper opened the door. Not Martha, the longtime help who'd known me since I was little, but someone new. Young, polite, unfamiliar. "They're not here," she said. "They mentioned you might show up, but you're not allowed inside." I blinked. "I'm... not what?" She didn't repeat it, just offered a weak smile and shut the door like she was closing a deal. As I stood there, I noticed the mailbox. The brass nameplate had always read Vale. Now it just said Finch. No trace of me, not even in metal. I didn't knock again. I walked away, holding on to my breath like it might break loose if I didn't. By early afternoon, I was at the county clerk's office, standing in line behind a woman arguing about a parking ticket. The clerk who finally called me up had the kind of face that was good at staying neutral. "I need to check a property deed," I said, keeping my voice steady. He took the address, typed it in, then paused. "Are you a legal party on this property?" "I was," I replied, "before my birthday." He raised an eyebrow, but handed me a printed record anyway. I scanned the page, already knowing what I'd find. And there it was, signed over last week, 3 days before I turned 18. Owner, Valora Finch. Witness, Callista Meyer. I asked if I could get a copy. He handed it to me without a word. I left the building with paper in hand and a bitterness in my mouth I couldn't swallow. They hadn't just waited until I was old enough to be on my own. They timed it like a business deal. Calculated, clean, cold. By late afternoon, I ended up at the public library, using a guest computer in the back, where no one could see the screen or my face. I logged into the old shared folder Callista, and I used in high school. She hadn't removed me. Probably forgot it existed. I opened the folder labeled Apps and Essays, and there it was. My college essay. The one I'd rewritten a dozen times. The one I'd cried over at 2 a.m. The title had been changed. Callista Meyer, Scholarship Final.pdf. I clicked it open. Every word was mine. Even the typo I'd purposely left in the third paragraph to make it feel human. I ran a reverse search, found the press release from the scholarship committee. Callista Meyer had received their Community Vision Award the previous spring. She used my words, my story, my pain. And once again, no one had questioned it. I closed the tab, logged out. At a diner down the street, I ordered the cheapest cup of coffee they had. The waitress didn't ask me how my day was. I was thankful for that. I grabbed a napkin, smoothed it flat on the table, and wrote, "Erase me from the records, and I'll write my own." I stared at those words until the ink bled a little from the heat of the cup. When the bill came, I reached for it and found an envelope tucked beneath. No return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a photocopy of a deed, my grandmother's house, my name on it, clear, undeniable. Attached was a sticky note in slanted script. "She wanted you to have this. I kept a copy. TC." My chest tightened. My fingers gripped the edges of the paper like it might vanish if I let go. I held the paper like it was a lifeline. For the first time in days, I felt like someone, somewhere, still believed I mattered. By the next morning, that feeling had been buried under a fresh wave of disgust. Callista's face was everywhere. I'd opened Instagram to check bus times, but there she was, front and center, with the caption, "Reclaiming Joy from Family Toxicity. My Journey." The video opened with soft music, her standing on a yoga mat, speaking in that gentle voice she used when she wanted people to see her as centered and wise. "We had to make hard decisions," she said, posing in a perfect warrior stance. "But sometimes removing someone toxic is an act of love." The next clip, brunch with Valora, laughing over mimosas. No mention of me, not even as a shadow. Her erasure campaign had evolved, now wrapped in self-help jargon and aesthetics. She wasn't just denying what they did, she was monetizing it. 30,000 views, comments like, "So brave," and "Family healing is hard but worth it," flooded the feed. I didn't comment, I didn't react. Instead, I showed up. Her cafe wasn't far from downtown. Meyer and Light, the kind of space with reclaimed wood, soft music, and overpriced matcha. Every inch curated, every photo perfectly staged. I asked for her at the counter, keeping my tone level. They directed me to the back patio. She was already sitting there, sipping tea, dressed in a linen jumpsuit like she'd just stepped off a wellness retreat. "I knew you'd come," she said without looking up. "You always need closure." I sat down, slow. I don't need closure. I need the truth. She raised her eyebrows, gave a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've always been dramatic, Lumen." "That word again," I said. "It's your favorite when you want to shut me down." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Mom's already nervous. If you stop digging through legal stuff, I'll do a video. Say sorry, publicly. We'll spin it." I stared at her. "You want to package your apology like it's a Black Friday deal?" She didn't blink. "This is what people respond to. Real forgiveness doesn't trend. Sympathy does." I pushed back my chair. "If you'd just owned what you did, instead of selling it, maybe I'd have stayed quiet." She looked at me then. Really looked. And for a brief second, her face cracked. But only for a second. I walked out without waiting for a response. Later that night, I sat in my borrowed apartment above a bookstore, drinking weak tea and listening to the radiator hiss. I opened my laptop, checked my blog's inbox. One new message. Subject: She did the same to me, long before you. The body of the email was short. I couldn't speak then, but I can now. Isolde Pen. Her words sat in my inbox like a ticking clock. Suddenly, I wasn't just the target. I was part of a pattern. I reread that sentence 3 times, heart racing. If the will was changed, when and how? By morning, I was in Merrick's truck, riding toward the Missouri border. I hadn't told him much, just that I needed a few days away, somewhere quiet where people didn't speak in hashtags or make apologies like PR statements. He offered without judgment, just nodded and cleared out a spot for my bag beside the glove compartment. We drove for hours without saying much. It was better that way. The quiet let me think without spiraling. Somewhere past mile marker 218, the CB radio crackled to life with usual trucker banter. I wasn't listening until I heard my mother's name, spoken like it belonged to folklore. "Heard Valora Finch pulled another one of her stunts," one voice said. "That lady's cold. Remember '07? The breath left my lungs before I realized I'd stopped breathing. I turned slowly toward Merrick, who kept his eyes on the road, but his grip on the wheel tightened. "You okay?" he asked, too casually. "How do you know her name?" My voice wasn't angry. It was something worse, calm, with a question that knew it didn't want the answer. He didn't respond right away. Just took the next exit, pulling off at a rest area surrounded by trees that looked like they'd been left behind by time. We sat under the shade of a broken picnic shelter. He reached into the glove box and handed me a faded photo. A woman in her early 30s, standing outside a community center with Valora, both smiling. The date on the back said 2006. "That's my sister," he said. "Back then, she worked with your mom on a literacy program for single mothers. Small town stuff. Real impact. Until Valora found a way to pin some financial issue on her." "What happened?" "She lost her job, reputation, everything. Valora stayed squeaky clean." I stared at the photo. The woman looked kind, honest. "Why didn't you say something?" He shrugged. "Because I didn't want to believe someone that polished could be that strategic. But you're not walking blind. That's your difference." We drove the rest of the way in silence. By the next day, I was back at the Asheville Public Library, hunched over a desk in the records archive, Merrick beside me with a quiet kind of watchfulness. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for proof. I searched Valora's name in public filings. A familiar pattern emerged. Property transfers, emergency guardianships, reassigned titles, always right before someone's birthday. Always in her favor. Always with some justification that sounded reasonable. Mental health concerns, relocation needs, family instability. She didn't make personal attacks. She built legal traps. I sat back, staring at the paper trail. It wasn't personal. It was a strategy. I was one of many. I opened my laptop and started typing. Not a rant, not a scream into the void. Just a clear, factual post. Erased on paper, ignored in presence. But here I am, writing back. I added screenshots, quotes, timelines. Then I ended with a message. If anyone else has felt this, message me. I'm listening. That night, I stayed in a small motel room outside the city. It smelled like old carpet and air freshener that gave up halfway through the job. I didn't sleep much, but around 2:30 a.m., my inbox pinged. Not one reply. 10. Most said thank you. One stood out. No greeting. No filler. "She didn't just erase you. She erased the will." I laughed. Not bitter. Just done. She thought this was harassment? No. It was just the opening statement. 7 days earlier, the message about the will had landed like a stone in my gut. I spent the first hour staring at the screen, rereading it, hovering over the sender's address. Eventually, I responded with one sentence. "How do you know this?" The reply came 3 minutes later. A name. A year, a county record number. The next morning, I was standing outside a records office in Boone County, Missouri, with a cup of vending machine coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard and something metallic. The clerk was helpful, not curious. She pulled the requested document from a weathered archive drawer without question, handed it over like it was a receipt. There it was, my grandmother's original will. My name, listed clearly as the inheritor of her home and trust, dated a year before she died. But the version Valora submitted, sealed and notarized, was dated 3 days before my 18th birthday. I scanned both versions side by side in disbelief. My name removed. Callista's added as witness. Valora named sole executor. The reason? Beneficiary exhibits signs of emotional instability. No diagnosis, no record. Just a statement signed under her guardianship. I left the building with shaking hands and a photocopy of both versions tucked inside my bag. The next stop was my bank. The account my grandmother opened for me at 13, part birthday gift, part safety net. I hadn't touched it in months. The woman at the desk was kind. She listened carefully, then frowned as she typed. "I'm sorry, but the account was closed 3 days before your 18th birthday. The funds were transferred out under a notarized power of attorney." "How much?" She paused. $14,200. "Where did it go?" "That record is sealed." I didn't argue, just nodded, stood, and walked out like I hadn't just watched years of savings vanish into a familiar black hole. By evening, I had a job. A local coffee shop on the edge of downtown. Quiet, cash-based, no questions. I worked under a fake name, no paperwork. The manager called me L. I said thank you and didn't correct him. The job was simple. Pour, serve, clean, smile. In the back room, between shifts, I printed everything. Deed records, Callista's scholarship post, bank transfer logs, that day's cease and desist letter, signed by Valora in a pen I recognized from her nightstand drawer. They didn't just want me out. They wanted me deleted, broke, powerless, untraceable. But I wasn't gone. I was working. That Thursday afternoon, I walked into a community legal aid center with a manila folder thick with proof. The receptionist looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but I have a case." The attorney they paired me with was young, sharp eyes, patient ears. She read every line, every copy. When she got to the will documents, she leaned back in her chair. "If what you're saying is accurate," she said, tapping the paper with a capped pen, "this isn't just a family dispute. It's a legal fraud, potential civil liability, and emotional duress under guardianship." She paused. "We'll take it, pro bono." I didn't cry. I just nodded. That night, I returned to the cafe for my shift. I clocked in, pulled espresso, wiped counters. It was after close when the delivery guy came in with a certified letter addressed in Valora's handwriting. The manager handed it over. "Looks serious." I opened it slowly, already knowing what was inside. Cease and desist. Immediately refrain from all public accusations, digital content, and any direct or indirect communication concerning the Finch family, its affiliates, or estate. I smiled as I folded it back up. This wasn't a warning. It was acknowledgement. I tucked the cease and desist into my apron pocket like it was a receipt, not a threat. Back behind the counter, I wiped down the espresso machine, counted tips, restocked lids. Routine was my rebellion now, doing the small things like they didn't try to erase me. It wasn't just the language of the letter that hit. It was the absence. No greeting, no sign-off, not even my name, just former dependent. Like I'd been a line item in a spreadsheet they'd long since deleted. 2 days later, I was wiping down a corner table after the lunch rush when I found a napkin folded under a plate. Not unusual. What was strange was the writing on it. "Hey, are you okay? I remember you. You wrote that piece about grief in 10th grade. Still think about it." "Mr. Ellery?" I stared at the name. Mr. Ellery had been my sophomore English teacher. Quiet, kind, always smelled like coffee and chalk. I barely remembered what I'd written. Some essay about losing my childhood dog and pretending not to care. But apparently, he hadn't forgotten it. I slid the note into my pocket. Didn't say anything to my coworkers. But for the first time in a while, my chest didn't feel like it was locked shut. That night, I opened my blog and uploaded a screenshot of Valora's letter. No commentary, just the image and a line. If you needed proof this was real, here's your invitation to the war they tried to bury. No adjectives, no accusations, just timestamps, scanned documents, a digital paper trail of betrayal. The post got picked up within the hour by a small advocacy group that focused on guardianship abuse. They didn't ask for permission. They just shared it with a caption. Another voice they didn't expect to speak. By morning, Callista struck back. She posted a video with soft piano music in the background, her makeup flawless, hair tucked behind her ear like she was talking to a friend instead of a camera. "We tried," she said, her voice trembling in a way only the camera could see. "But some people just want to stay hurt. Please respect our silence." The comments were a war zone. Some called her brave. Others called her a liar. And a handful asked one thing. "Where's Lumen?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I disabled comments on my own blog and added a line beneath my last post. Silence isn't peace. It's protection. For them, not for us. That night, after close, I sat in the storage room with a cup of leftover drip coffee. I was scrolling through email replies when one name made me sit upright. Subject: Still got your back. From Ava Penn, Valora's niece. They don't know I'm writing this, but I think it's time someone told you what really happened after the funeral. For the first time, it wasn't my voice echoing the truth. It was theirs unraveling. 5 days later, Ava and I sat on a park bench under a faded gazebo where the paint peeled like it had secrets of its own. She handed me a manila envelope and kept her eyes on the creek beside us. She made me promise I'd only give this to you if things got like this, Ava said. I opened it carefully. Inside was a crisp copy of my grandmother's will, dated, notarized, and untouched. My name was there, bold and unmissable, sole heir. Every page bore my grandmother's handwriting, notes in the margins, even a smiley face next to the kitchen renovation clause. It was real. It was full of her. She gave me this a month before she died, Ava whispered. She said, just in case Valora does what Valora does. I should have come forward sooner. You did now, I said. That's enough. Back at the Legal Aid Center, I placed the document on the desk between me and my attorney. Her eyes widened as she read through it, page by page, then reached for her tablet. We're filing for motion immediately, she said. This changes everything. The motion to present the will, and its accompanying proof of tampering, was submitted that same afternoon. Within 24 hours, a hearing was set. The judge, a woman in her late 60s, with the demeanor of a weathered stone wall, didn't even blink as she set the date. The courtroom was colder than I remembered, not in temperature, but in tone. Valora entered with a fresh blowout, and her lawyer, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Callista trailed behind them, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and holding a notebook like it might shield her from consequences. They didn't look at me. Valora's attorney made a motion to dismiss within the first 10 minutes. Baseless, manufactured, irrelevant. My lawyer responded with one word. Recording. From the bench, the judge gestured. Play it. We queued up the audio, ripped from Merrick's CB radio cache, cleaned just enough to make every word land like a punch to the ribs. Cut her off before she turns 18. I don't want to leave loopholes. Silence. It wasn't just the room that stilled. Valora's hand froze mid-note. Callista stopped doodling in her notebook. The judge leaned back, steepled her fingers, and said, Motion to dismiss is denied. My lawyer handed over the original will. The judge flipped through it, nodded once, then looked at Valora's side. This will is entered into evidence. You have until next week to submit a rebuttal. When we walked out, the air hit me like I'd held my breath the whole time, and forgotten how to exhale. Press waited on the steps. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The story spread faster than any family brunch post could. Finch family fraud trended on Twitter by sunset. My blog, which had peaked at a few thousand clicks, hit 200,000 views overnight. That evening, as I sat in my apartment, sipping tea and trying not to collapse from emotional fatigue, Callista posted a story. Just one line, white text on a black screen. "Sometimes you think you're protecting someone. Turns out you were just covering up." She laughed, not cruelly, like someone who'd waited years for that answer. It had only been 2 days since the courtroom, but it felt like a lifetime. My name was out there now, attached to something louder than silence. The headlines weren't mine, but they were about me. They used words like alleged, disputed, former guardian. But one local editorial didn't dance around it. The perfect Finch legacy was built on paper cuts. It landed on doorsteps the morning after the hearing. My face wasn't on the front page, but my grandmother's name was, alongside a quote from the will Valora tried to bury. Valora herself issued a press statement hours later. "This is a misunderstanding being handled through the appropriate legal channels. We ask for privacy during this time." Funny how people who build their lives in public suddenly beg for shadows when the light turns harsh. I was halfway through a bowl of soup in the cafe's back room when a text came through from one of the paralegals on our legal team. Short and sharp. She fired him this morning. Her attorney, gone. The man who'd built her defense like a castle of ice now melted away. I leaned back, letting the news settle. Not satisfaction, just confirmation. Later that night, I opened an email that made me pause before clicking. From Burner56 EmailNet. Subject. No subject. I didn't want to sign anything. She made me. I just wanted the attention, not this. Callista. I didn't write back. I didn't even save the message. I copied it into my archive and closed the tab. That wasn't an apology. That was debris from a ship she chose to sink. Around midnight, I logged into a Zoom meeting posted by an advocacy group called Echo House. They hosted support spaces for people dealing with family estrangement. I didn't plan to talk, just listen. The screen loaded. A grid of strangers filled the screen. Faces in dim rooms, a few with cameras off, names hidden behind usernames like sibling erased or grandchild ghosted. A moderator welcomed everyone, offered a short breathing exercise, and opened the floor. One woman spoke about being disowned for calling out financial abuse. Another man talked about being cut out of a trust after coming out. When it came my turn, I unmuted myself without knowing I would. I was removed from my own house and called toxic for asking questions, I said, voice steadier than expected. The person who raised me used the law to erase me. She left me on the side of the road and still said she was protecting me. A silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just witness. Then, in the chat, someone typed, "You're not alone. We're the daughters who came back with receipts." My screen blurred for a second. Maybe from my eyes. Maybe from the weight finally shifting. A private message popped up. "I work in estate law. If you ever want to pursue full civil recovery, I'm in." I replied, "Not for revenge, but for record. They told a story. Now I will too." The next morning, I was prepping espresso shots when my phone buzzed. I wiped my hands on a towel, picked it up, and froze at the name on the screen. Thelma Crane. I hadn't heard her voice in years, not since the funeral. She'd always been the quiet one at gatherings, the one Valora rolled her eyes at, called the hippie aunt who never grew up. But Thelma was the only one who hugged me like she meant it. She was the only one who didn't talk to me like I was a problem to manage. I stepped outside before answering. "Hello?" "Hey, sugar," she said. "You ready to see the house?" My throat tightened, but I answered. "Only if I walk in holding the key." 2 weeks later, I stood at the threshold of a different kind of door. One that wasn't locked, wasn't slammed shut, and didn't require a key to prove I belonged. But I still carried the key anyway, clasped tightly in my hand like a vow I'd made to myself. The invitation had come in the form of a simple email. Would you consider speaking at our summit for women impacted by family estrangement and inheritance abuse? At first, I'd closed it without replying. But then I reread the list of speakers, names I'd seen in my inbox before, on Zoom screens, in threads under my blog posts. One of them had been the woman who messaged me, "We're the daughters who came back with receipts." Thelma didn't push, but her quiet support hung in the air every time we spoke. "You don't have to go," she'd said, "but if you do, tell it the way it happened, not the way they want it remembered." So here I was, 2 weeks after the courtroom, 1 week after Callista's vague online retreat, and just a few days since Valora's new attorney issued another press statement that said everything and nothing at once. The summit was held in a repurposed school gymnasium, draped in soft cloth, faux plants, and folding chairs that didn't quite match. It wasn't glamorous. It was honest. I stood behind the stage curtain, wearing a simple black dress, and one item I hadn't worn since that day at the gas station, the red silk scarf. When the MC called my name, I walked on stage, the scarf draped around my fingers. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I unfolded the scarf and held it up. "I was blindfolded," I began, "but I was never blinded." A hush fell across the room. I was told it was a surprise, a gift, but what they meant was silence. What they gave me was absence. What they tried to erase was me. I talked for 7 minutes about the will, the scholarship, the cease and desist letters, the photo of my mother and sister toasting my disappearance with champagne and hashtags, but I never named them. They don't get to be the headline anymore. The story belongs to me now. Someone in the front row cried. I kept going. Afterward, I didn't go backstage. I stayed and listened to the other women. One spoke about being cut off after reporting a family member's embezzlement. Another shared how her mother had forced her to sign over her college fund, promising it was temporary. Our stories weren't identical, but the erasure was. A local photographer had been in the audience. I hadn't noticed him until later that evening when the photo went live online. Me mid-sentence, scarf in hand, the words, "Station of Severance," from abandoned to unbreakable, etched beneath. The post exploded. Within 24 hours, my inbox overflowed. I had a scarf like that too. That pose? That was me, in court, alone. My mother used the word toxic, like it was a stamp she could stick on my forehead and be done with me. Not all messages were kind. Some were from relatives of the women who'd spoken. Some were from strangers who called us bitter, attention-seeking, dramatic. But we weren't quiet anymore. Callista posted a statement the next day. "We misunderstood the weight of what we did. This is her narrative now. We won't contest it." I read it 3 times. Not out of sentiment, but out of study. It wasn't an apology. It was a legal shield. It was distance disguised as grace. Still, it marked a shift. That evening, I returned to the lake house. My house. The air smelled like pine and old wood. The porch light flickered the way it always had. I checked the mailbox out of habit and found a small envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo. My grandmother holding me as a baby on that same porch, wrapped in the red scarf. On the back, in her handwriting, "You were always meant to keep the light." Outside, the gravel crunched as their car pulled away. Inside, silence finally felt like peace, not punishment. I stayed near the door for a moment, listening. Not because I thought they might come back, but because it was the first time I hadn't flinched after watching them leave. The stillness wasn't something I had to survive anymore. It was something I'd earned. The light was changing, slipping into that soft amber hue late afternoon gives you when the sun is starting to let go. I moved through the house slowly, my hand brushing the edge of the hallway walls, the worn banister of the back stairs, the spot in the dining room where the paint peeled a little. Every room carried her touch. My grandmother's, not Valora's, not Callista's, hers. When I reached the kitchen, I opened the drawer beneath the sink. Still smelled faintly of lemon oil and rust. Inside, tucked beneath a bundle of faded dish towels, was a sealed envelope. my name on the front. The handwriting was unmistakable. I sat down at the old table before opening it, my fingers steady this time. It was dated 6 months before she died. "If you're reading this," the letter began, "it means they tried what I feared." She knew. She knew what Valora was capable of. She knew it wasn't just dysfunction, it was deliberate. "You have always been the one I trusted to carry the family's truth," she wrote. "Not because you're the loudest, but because you see people clearly, even when it hurts." She ended with a line that sounded so much like her voice I could almost hear it in the room with me. "The house is yours, not because of inheritance, but because it always knew your name." I folded the letter carefully, pressed it flat, and placed it on the table like something sacred. No tears, just breath, just a heartbeat slowing into something steady. The knock came just as the sun began dipping below the tree line. I didn't ask who it was. I already knew. I opened the door to see Valora and Callista standing there, side by side, like they had rehearsed this moment in the car ride over. Valora spoke first. "We don't expect forgiveness, but maybe we can talk." Her voice wasn't firm. It wavered at the end, like she wanted to sound in control, but didn't quite believe herself. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I stepped outside, closed the screen door behind me, and stood in front of them. "Talk?" I said. "Now that the story isn't just yours?" Callista looked away. Valora inhaled sharply. "I didn't know," she said. "You did," I answered. "You just didn't think I'd make it to the microphone. I could have shouted. I could have brought up the essay theft, the erased will, the scholarship, the bank accounts, the gas station. But I didn't. I didn't need to prove anything. You taught me what boundaries feel like," I said, "by crossing every one of mine." I looked down at the porch beneath me, then back at them. Now I'm building some of my own. They start here, at this door. Valora's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Callista whispered, "Okay." I nodded once. "Take care." I went back inside and closed the door behind me, not with anger, but with certainty. The evening settled in. I brewed a cup of tea and lit one candle on the fireplace mantel, the kind my grandmother used to keep for storms. Above the mantel was a picture frame that had sat empty since the day I moved in. It had once held a photo of Valora's wedding, but I'd removed it weeks ago. Now I unfolded the letter, smoothed its creases, and slid it into the frame. "You made me visible again," I whispered. "I'll stay that way." And this time, I'm the author, the name on the deed, and the voice on the page. 6 months had passed since the courtroom, since the scarf speech, since the front door stayed shut behind me for the last time I saw them. Things didn't settle, they transformed. The lake house had changed too, not in foundation or structure, but in spirit. It no longer carried the weight of exile. It held the pulse of presence. The new sign was simple, metal, etched in black letters. Lumen House, for the unseen. It hung next to the front door, where the old Finch family nameplate had once been. Where the wind chimes used to ring hollow, now hung 3 brass bells donated by a woman named Diane, who left her husband after he cut off their daughter. Inside, we kept it simple. Open seating, no appointments. A bookshelf filled with journals left by women who had passed through and needed a place to leave their first truth. Some wrote full stories. Some left only names. One card just said, "Still here." There was a wall covered in notes, soft yellow slips with scribbles like, "I wasn't crazy," and "It wasn't my fault." They weren't confessions, they were confirmations, and none of them had names unless someone chose to write it. I didn't preach. That wasn't the point. I ran a small circle once a week. It wasn't therapy, just space, just voices. Sometimes it was just me and 3 women. Sometimes 10 showed up. One time, it was a father who'd been cut off from his son after a divorce poisoned by lies. He didn't talk much, just cried into his hands. That was allowed too. At the start of each circle, I said the same line. We don't fix people here. We remind them they were never broken. On a Tuesday morning, the bell over the door chimed, and a girl walked in, maybe early 20s, maybe younger. Shoulders hunched, coat sleeves pulled over her hands. She looked around like she didn't know if she belonged. I greeted her the same way I greeted everyone. "Welcome in. There's coffee, tea, water, and quiet." She nodded and sat down near the bookshelf. We didn't speak for the first 20 minutes. Then, as I restocked a stack of flyers near the window, she said quietly, "My mother called me a shadow. I think she meant it as love, but it still felt cold." I didn't respond with advice. I just nodded and said, "It feels warmer here." She smiled. That night, after everyone left and the lights dimmed to the setting I'd programmed for evenings, soft amber, like candlelight, I stepped outside with my mug of tea and sat on the porch swing. The lake was still. The mist moved across it like a hush, not a haunting. I sipped slowly, let the silence wrap around me, not heavy, not lonely, full. Inside, on the wall beside the mantel, the letter still hung in its frame. Below it sat a new photo, one taken by the same photographer who'd captured the scarf moment. This one was of the house's new front sign, bathed in morning light, with the shadows of two women walking up the steps. No one would know who they were, but I did. I traced the rim of my mug and whispered, not to the past, but to the now. I wasn't erased. I was rewritten by my own hand.